My name is Brianna, and this is my story. I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, lived in a home with my mom and my grandparents for a short while of my young childhood. My biological dad wasn't really consistently around. I knew him, I met him. I remember seeing him a couple of times, but every day it was my mom. We lived with my grandparents for a short while until I was about 6, I believe it was, and then came my brother. My brother was from a different man who then became to be my stepdad, who my mom married, but my dad, who I call and consider my dad. My dad was from Houston. They got married on my brother's first birthday, so I was around 7 around then. We moved to Houston and then started my life in Texas. In Texas, my mom had 2 more kids. So I'm the oldest out of 4 children. All of the younger siblings are 2 years apart, so they kind of grew up together. I kind of grew up ahead of them a little by myself. When we first moved to Houston, my mom did work, but at some point, I want to say around the 3rd child, she stopped working and she became a stay-at-home mom. My dad had a trucking company. She helped my dad build his business and she was his office manager. At some point, their relationship got to a place where it was kind of volatile. And at that point, life seemed to be a bit unstable for me because I grew up with my mom being very strict and very on me, like what they call a helicopter mom. And at a certain point, there was a time where she was going through a lot and she was experiencing a lot. So at the time where I was kind of like transitioning into becoming a preteen and a young teen, that was the same time that she was experiencing the worst in her marriage. So it kind of made me be, I guess, left in the back is what I experienced. And it probably wasn't just me, it probably was my siblings as well, but they were much younger. I think around that time is a time where you start to really figure out yourself as a young lady, as a young woman, and you're starting to become who you are. But during that time, I saw my mom go through a lot. So part of me felt like she couldn't take on any more of what I could possibly be going through. So that started the place where I kept things inside. That started the place where I felt like I had to take control of my life and what I had going on. Throughout the course of that journey, my mom and my dad separated. So now we're living in 2 separate homes, and now my mom is having to go back to work. When she started to go back to work, that started me becoming, I like to joke with my sister all the time about me being her second mama. But all my friends back then, I remember them saying, oh, Brianna can't go nowhere because she got to babysit those kids. Brianna can't do this because she got to be with those kids. If it wasn't cheerleading, I was with those kids, my siblings, and which back then I was used to not going many places, not going a lot of, because she was so strict. But when I look back, I'm like, okay, I didn't really get to go to the parties that the kids were going to in high school, hang out with my friends really like that because I had to take care of my younger siblings, which when I got to college, that turned into, Brenda want to do everything. I used to have a babysitter when I was in Baton Rouge that was a cheerleader at Southern University. And all my life, I was a cheerleader. And I thought that I was going to go back to Baton Rouge, go to Southern University, become a cheerleader, and that was going to be my future. But my mom, when I graduated from high school, her and my siblings moved back to Baton Rouge. And because of me being in the house and being so, held so strict and having to be this babysitter for my siblings, I decided Louisiana wasn't it for me. I needed to go out and have my own life, have my own freedom. And so I went to Austin, Texas. But like I said, that's when I started just doing everything. I wanted to go to all the parties. If it had parties on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I might have been there. Going off to college, it was liberating, but it also was very difficult because I came from my mama being on me, like on my neck, right here, to me having all of this freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. But also, I remember vividly her dropping me off at college, and I felt like I did something wrong because she had a meltdown. And when I look back, I know that she probably feared her first kid, leaving the nest and going off on her own, and she didn't know how to take it. But to me, I felt like, oh, I did something wrong. Also during that time, my parents had just got divorced, and I was left in a place where I felt like I didn't know where I belonged. On one hand, it felt like my mom dropped me off and she was like, okay, I got one kid out the house, I'm gonna focus on my other 3 kids. And then I didn't know where I stood with my dad, because parents don't talk to kids about divorce. They don't explain what's going on, how you should feel, things are just happening around you. And what the feeling that I felt was abandonment. I started dating, and I remember I had a friend who was a friend from middle school, but her and I stayed in touch throughout our lives. She, I think around the summer of our senior year, she had her first kid, and I remember her telling me that she wouldn't take it back for nothing because she finally had something that gave her unconditional love. Like no matter what, her kid wasn't going anywhere. She experienced a rocky childhood with both of her parents, so that just stuck with me. And then when I got around to me dating and me be with a guy, and I thought I loved him. I know now it's puppy love, but And I remember at the point when we were having sex, and I decided that, do what you have to do, for lack of better words. When he asked me the question, what are we gonna do? Not for one second did I think that terminating my baby was an option. For one, because I was so strong in who I was in my faith, who I believed in God, and I felt like Christians don't have abortions. We're not doing that. And because I was in that crazy place of feeling abandoned, not knowing who I can go to, not knowing who I had, I was like, well, I can have my child, and my child will be the person that will love me unconditionally. He's gonna be here. He's not going anywhere. I'm gonna be there for him. And when I think back, I was only 19 making that decision, and that was the wrong decision to make as a child, because I was still a child, about to have a child. I don't take my child back for nothing. I love him to the death of me. He has taught me so much. I couldn't even express my love for him. But as a 20-year-old having my first child, that set off a thunderstorm. I remember growing up, my mama used to tell me all the time that I had to be the one to break the generational curse of having a kid out of wedlock. My aunt, she had her first child when I want to say she was 17, but her and her child's father, they got married because they had the child. My mom had me out of wedlock. I do believe my grandmother was pregnant with her first child out of wedlock as well, and then she had to marry my grandfather. And so my mom used to tell me all the time, you got to be the one to break the generational curse. You got to be the one to break the generational curse. But at the same time, I was so lost in my own way. I just knew that, I thought that me having a child would bring me joy and bring me love in the moment. And I wasn't even thinking about the generational curse that I was continuing on. God has always been a part of my life. My grandfather was a reverend or pastor at our family's church growing up. When I was young, I was in the youth choir. I don't know why they let me sing lead, but I think it was because of who my grandfather and my grandmother was, because I can't sing today. I sang in the choir growing up. I remember going to Bible studies, vacation Bible schools. My grandmother really was the solid foundation in our family as far as faith is concerned. I used to look at her and say that she was a saint, because I never met another lady that prayed so much, that was so faithful in the way that she served God. Like, you couldn't get her off her track. I would call her and be like, hey, mama, we call her mama. Hey, mama, you want to go eat with me when I would be in Baton Rouge? And she'll be like, well, you know, today is Friday. It's my day to go to the church and pray for the world. She'll think about it. Because she's human. She'll think about her love for me. But then she'll go right back to, I got to do what God has called me to do. And she never wavered from that. Nothing can get her out of what she was called to do as far as God was concerned, what God called her to do. And so growing up, I always experienced her being so strong in her faith and her standing so firm in what she believed in. She lost 3 of her kids before she left this earth. I saw her go through so much, and she still was faithful to God. She never felt like God was punishing her, or at least she didn't show it to us. I never saw it. When I think back about my beginning with religion, with faith, it began with my grandparents and with my mom too, because she was a preacher's kid, and so she raised me like that, is what I felt like. There was no celebrating Halloween. There was not much that we did outside of who God was and who God is. But we grew up in a Baptist church, and you know, back then Baptist churches were, I feel like they had a lot of strict rules, like women couldn't wear pants, and I guess like they say in the Bible, like a lot of religious laws, a lot of principles that you went by. And as I grew up, I started to feel like, what me wearing pants to church got to do with me serving God? You know, I started to question certain things. And you know, ultimately, the Baptist church now, they wear pants in church. You know, these things have changed, but back then, I felt like they held you so strongly to rules and these laws that they put in place as far as that particular religion. And it goes for each religion, because Catholic people have their own set of rules, you know, Pentecostal people have their own set of rules, but in the Baptist church, that's my personal experience, they held you to those rules, and it was like if you weren't doing what those rules were, you were not of God. Or sometimes you could experience a lot of judgment. Sometimes you could experience a lot of leaned on like condemnation. And to know God today, I know that God is not a condemning God. And I feel like that is something that has kind of struck my generation of people when it comes to church and how we experience church, what we view church to be, and church hurt. Around 13, 12, again, when my parents were having their issues, my dad, his family was Church of Christ. My mom and me had a Baptist background. When they got married, he wanted us to merge with his family because it was said that the woman is supposed to do as the husband does. But my daddy didn't go to church. He just wanted us to be there with his family and his religion, the Church of Christ. My mama absolutely didn't like it, and that started to create issues within the household. And for me, I was always a church girl. I wanted to be at church, and so I found me a way, even though my mama, because it came to a point where my mama just stopped going to church because she didn't want to have that fight with him, but then she also didn't want to attend the Church of Christ church as well. So I would find rides to church. My mama would actually go and drop me off and then go back home. Or I would get friends to come and pick me up, their parents to come pick me up, or my godparents to come and pick me up. I just knew that I loved the feeling of being at church, being in God's presence. And it kind of really started when I was like 13 or 14. I remember I went off and got baptized by myself. And my family wasn't even there because I just felt so strongly, and I knew then that I was just giving my life to Christ. And when I look back, I think it also plays back into like the church upbringing. Either you're solely living for Christ and not of the world. So there was always this back and forth of me being so into church and so into God. And then on the other hand, I was a cheerleader. They playing secular music in the band, they're playing secular music at our competitions, and we dancing and gyrating and dropping it like it's hot. Like, that was the life. You know, we had school dances. I did go to the school dances, and you know, back that thing up I was coming up in the 99s and 2000s. You know, that's what I was doing. But then I would go to church on Sunday, and nobody around me made me feel like that was wrong. It seemed like that was the way. So that's the way that I learned. I remember my friends' faith being so strong and their desire to be in God's presence was so strong, it inspired me. Before I had my child, I remember joining a church here in Houston, and that's when I started again on my faith walk. But then I had my kid and life started happening, and although I went through a lot of things, I never felt like God was doing something to me. I always felt like it was me. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. God gave me an idea that He wanted to use me to create a space where His love can be lifted higher and put in the forefront, and a place where we can gain community and friendship with other like minds who serve Christ, who love the Lord, and who are on fire for Him. I have been talking to my friends about wanting to get this podcast back on and popping, but also because I am in that place of surrender, I had to change the way that I went to God with my plans. And so I stopped taking my plans to Him, and I would tell God to show me the plan that He has for my life. One day I got a message from somebody who I know of. I know him through someone, but I don't really know him like that. But he messaged me and told me he saw a video that I did sharing a dream that God gave me. He said that God had been communicating to him for some time to talk to me. But you know how we get in our own ways, and we're like, well, why I need to go talk to that person? Why I need to do that? You know, should I not? And that's the place that he was in. But the day that he saw my dream video, he said, all right, I got it, God. I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to her. So he messaged me, and when I got on the phone with him, he just started straight off ministering to me. I couldn't get a word in. He just was running and overflowing with what God had told him to communicate to me. And all the things that he said to me were things that I had been praying about. God wants you to know that it is Him. Like, quit saying that I feel like something. It is Him communicating to you. Know it in your spirit and know it in your heart that it is Him using you, and to be bold and to say those things out loud. He also told me God was raising me up to be the one in my family breaking bloodline curses. And I remember at the end of that call, I was overwhelmed. I told him I'm overwhelmed, but I'm overwhelmed in a good way. I'm overwhelmed with joy because he just didn't know. By his obedience, he was confirming everything that God had put in me and that I was curious about. And he also spoke to this platform that God has given me. He said that, I watched your podcast a couple of times last year, and I just knew my platform was for a reason, that God gave me that platform. God gave me this podcast to be able to reach women that were like me, women that were doing things that I did in my past in the world, like hanging out, going to the clubs, partying, dating the wrong guys, being of the world. But people, they look like me. And, sometimes we see social media and we think that that's what we're supposed to follow, because that's the setup that they did. They set that place up as a place we're all just looking at each other and feeding off of each other's energy, but it's the energy of the world. It's not the energy of who God has called us to be. And I believe that God has called me to bring in His children closer to Him. Just like in the Bible where He said He has called His disciples to go out and bring forth people back to His nation and to speak the word of Christ. Like, that's what I'm here to do. But also, I have learned that you have to test the spirit. And there ain't no tea or no shade to that man at all. But I went to God and I was like, God, confirm to me that you sent him to me, that the words that he spoke to me were from you. And if I didn't believe that God had talked to me then, I woke up the next morning, prayed my prayer, I started to go on with my life, and then I opened up Facebook as I was getting ready. I was standing in my bathroom, opened up my phone, and I saw a girl that I was familiar with on live, and she was just sitting in front of the camera just speaking. And I would normally see her in a church setting, but this setting, she was just sitting right in front of the camera, and something told me to open it. I've never opened any of her videos, but something that morning told me, listen to what she has to say. She started telling a story about how she was in a place in her life where she was confused on what her life was about to look like, and she had been praying for God to just show her what's next. And she said that a guy reached out to her on Facebook and called her, and she never answers calls on Facebook, but she answered it, and the guy just started ministering to her. She couldn't get a word in, and he was confirming the things that she had prayed for. And I was like, what are the odds that I tap on this girl's live one particular morning, which I never do, and she's saying the same thing happened to her that happened to me just the day before. I'm like, okay, God, I hear you loud and clear. I typed in the chat for the live, and I said, this was for me. And she stopped abruptly, and she was like, Brianna Chase, God wanted me to tell you that if this live wasn't for anybody else, it was for you. And she immediately started saying the same exact things that this guy had spoken to me the day before. The same exact thing, from the bloodline curses, from even the group of people that God is calling me to reach and calling me to speak to. She said that God was using my influence that I have and my platform that I have to draw in women like me, and which was the same thing the guy said before. She spoke about me being in turmoil, or like in this place of back and forth for the last 3 years. I know that what I had been going through for the last 3 years is what brought me to this moment where I am now. I went through losing my dad, and during losing him, I lost faith in people. I had gone through so much disappointment with friends, with family, I never thought that I would experience before. And during that time, I got depressed. I started drinking heavily. I secluded myself in my house, and I was just really going through it. Until I got to a point to where I was like, okay, enough is enough, because if I keep going down this spiral, I probably would lose it all. And I started back getting into my word. I started speaking over my home, praying over my home, because whatever spirit that was over that house, I needed to get it up and out of there and bring myself back to life. But it really wasn't me bringing myself back to life. It was me getting in my word and God bringing me back to life. And he spoke to me one day loud and clear, and he told me that my expectations were in the wrong place. I had them in people, and they should have always been in him. And from that point on, that's what turned this whole trajectory around, because it was like a door had opened. And I'm like, this whole time, the love that I had been looking for from people, it was in God. Like, the things that I was missing, the type of parents that I thought I would have, I could go to him because he's my father. I would be pouring myself into people, ultimately in hopes of getting that same type of love back in return, but the only one that was able to give me that love is God. And so that's where my expectations should be, because we are to go to God with a heart of expectancy, because his promises are yes and amen. I want y'all to know that I am just in a place of obedience, and my heart is wide open for what God is wanting to do through me and where he is leading me. And I just thank him, because I remember praying and literally crying out to him about how close I wanted to be to him, like begging him to pull me in close to him. And the peace that I have now, I have never felt. The love and the joy that I feel now, I have never felt. And I just want anybody to know that feels like they are alone, or they feel like nobody loves them, like God truly does love you, and his love is enough. His love is enough. I just pray that you guys turn your heart to Christ and try Jesus. Give him a chance. Because he ain't going to fail you. He has not failed us. He has not failed me yet. He hasn't failed you yet. We just have to really open our eyes and get out of our own way. Surround yourself with people who are on the same walk with Christ as you are, because I remember being alone. I remember being in a season that I talked about when I lost my dad and I didn't have nobody. And so when I was down and out, I didn't have people that I could call to lift me up and to pray for me when I couldn't pray for myself, or to speak life into me when I couldn't speak life into myself. And I prayed that God would send me people who could do that for me, who could help me, uplift me, and who was rooted in God and who can give of his love to me. And it has been a game changer. I really truly believe that God has surrounded me with my destiny helpers. I feel like everything that I thought that I have lost in life, he has replaced and has doubled, like triple, like evermore. Like, it's, you know how you see those memes, like, you know, whatever I lost, it wasn't nothing that I lost. I really feel like that the things that have left me, the people who have left me, the places that I've been that I felt like I couldn't have gotten out of, God has brought me around to a place that was unimaginable and that I thought that at a point in time, I would never get to. And to experience this is mind-blowing, but I don't even have no words for it. But I do think that it's important to have people around you who can pour into you and, you know, intercede for you and really, truly be there for you without judgment, without strife, and really love you. I get asked this question all the time about how do I know when I'm hearing God's voice? And my answer to everybody when they ask me that is to go to your word. Read the Bible. That's the place where you can learn who God is, learn about his character, how he shows up for you, how he speaks to you, how he uses you. So my answer is always to go back to the Bible, because I believe the Bible to be the complete truth and nothing but the truth. And that's where I learned the way that God communicated to me through my visions weren't just something that I was making up. So go to your word, read your Bible every day. I hope each week that you tune in that you see him and not me. My prayer every day is that he decreases me in my flesh and his spirit is built up through me, and that when you view my channel, I pray that you see God first and not this space in front of you. I pray that you hear him first and not my own words. This channel is for someone who's growing in their faith, because I'm doing the same thing. We're walking on this journey together. And we need each other. We need community. We need people around we can go to that can answer questions when we have questions, who can pray for us when we're in need, when we can't pray for ourselves sometimes, because there are those times. But this channel is for the woman who desires to be close to Christ, because that's right where I'm at. Bree, a year from now, it's only up from here. You've gotten this far, and there's no limit to where God can take you. I'm Bree, and welcome to Chase of Faith Podcast.